Elena's heart raced as she stepped out of the sleek black limousine, her eyes wide with wonder. Before her stood Crest Manor, its Gothic spires reaching towards the starry sky. Tonight, the old mansion had been transformed into a Halloween wonderland, with glowing jack-o'-lanterns lining the path and eerie music drifting through the air. Wow, Elena breathed, smoothing down her shimmering gold dress, a thrift store find she'd painstakingly altered to fit. At 25, Elena couldn't believe her luck. She'd received a mysterious, ornate invitation to the midnight masquerade just a week ago, delivered to her family's modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. The invitation had been a shock. Growing up in a lower middle-class family that struggled to make ends meet, Elena had never been part of the social circles that typically received such invitations. She worked as a junior accountant at a small firm, her days filled with numbers, and her nights often spent helping her parents with their catering business. Luxury events like this were something she only read about in magazines or glimpsed on TV. The midnight masquerade was shrouded in mystery. Elena had never even heard of Crest Manor, let alone seen it. The estate was located in an area so exclusive that most locals weren't even aware of its existence, much less ever received an invitation to visit. Part of her wondered if there had been some mistake. Perhaps the invitation was meant for someone else, someone with wealth and connections. But the envelope had been addressed to her, her name written in elegant gold script that seemed to shimmer in the light. Elena had debated whether to attend, knowing she'd be out of her depth among the city's upper crust. But the thought of missing this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was unbearable. She'd scraped together every penny she could, borrowing her mother's costume jewelry and spending hours watching makeup tutorials online to perfect her look. Now, standing before the imposing manor, Elena felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was a world she'd never experienced, so far removed from her daily life that it almost felt like stepping into a fairy tale. Whatever the reason for her invitation, she was determined to make the most of this magical night. As she approached the grand entrance, Elena couldn't help but feel a tingle of excitement mixed with a hint of nervousness. She knew nothing about the host or the other guests. The invitation had been clear. No phones, no cameras, and absolute discretion was required. The doorman, dressed as a Victorian butler, bowed low as he opened the massive oak doors. "Welcome to the midnight masquerade, miss," he intoned, his voice oddly hollow. "May I see your invitation?" Elena handed over the black and gold card, watching as the doorman examined it closely. After a moment, he nodded and returned it to her. "Everything seems to be in order. Please enjoy your evening." She stepped inside, and her jaw dropped. The ballroom was a sight to behold. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft, flickering light over the guests, who were dressed in the most elaborate costumes she'd ever seen. Whispers of silk and lace brushed against her as people moved past, their faces hidden behind intricate masks. Elena made her way to the bar, ordering a glass of champagne to calm her nerves. As she sipped the bubbly drink, she couldn't help but wonder about the other guests. Who were they? How had they received their invitations? The air of mystery only added to the excitement of the evening. He was tall and lean, dressed impeccably in a Victorian gentleman's outfit, complete with a top hat and cane. His mask, which covered the upper half of his face, was black with silver filigree. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a deep, mesmerizing blue that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Victor." Elena felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Elena," she replied, offering her hand. Victor took it, brushing his lips against her knuckles in a gentlemanly kiss. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, gesturing towards the dance floor where couples were twirling to a haunting waltz. Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "Oh, I don't really know how," she admitted, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I'd probably just step on your toes." Victor's eyes twinkled with warmth and understanding. "My dear Elena," he said softly, "dancing is not about knowing the steps. It's about feeling the music and letting it guide you. Besides," he added with a playful wink, "I have very resilient toes." His genuine smile and gentle humor made Elena's nervousness melt away. She found herself returning his smile, a newfound confidence blooming within her. "Well, when you put it that way," she said, setting down her champagne flute, "how can I refuse?" As Victor led her to the dance floor, Elena couldn't help but notice how gracefully he moved, almost as if he were gliding across the floor. He placed one hand on her waist and took her other hand in his, sending a shiver down her spine. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, "and trust in the music." As they began to move, Elena was surprised at how natural it felt. Victor guided her with gentle pressure and subtle cues, making her feel as if she'd been dancing all her life. She found herself lost in the music and the movement, captivated by Victor's deep blue eyes. "See?" Victor said softly. "You're a natural." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "It's all thanks to you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You make it easy." As they continued to dance, Elena felt an inexplicable connection to Victor growing stronger with each step. His touch, his gaze, the way he moved with her, it all felt impossibly right, as if they'd known each other for lifetimes instead of minutes. "It's my first time," she admitted. "I've never even heard of this event before receiving the invitation. It's all so unexpected." Elena paused, remembering her initial disbelief at being invited to such an exclusive gathering. "What about you? Do you come every year?" A shadow seemed to pass over Victor's face, but it was gone so quickly Elena thought she must have imagined it. "You could say that," he replied with a small smile. "The midnight masquerade is a tradition for me." Elena's curiosity piqued. "A tradition? That sounds intriguing. You must be part of the city's elite to attend regularly." Victor's smile turned enigmatic. "Let's just say I have a long-standing connection to this place. But tell me more about you, Elena." Elena hesitated for a moment, surprised at the sudden urge to open up to this mysterious stranger. There was something about Victor, his gentle demeanor, his attentive gaze, the way he seemed to truly listen, that made her feel inexplicably safe and understood. I never thought I'd be at a place like this," she began, her voice soft. "Growing up, we barely had enough to get by. My parents sacrificed so much for me, working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I've always believed that true strength comes from what you're willing to give up for others. My parents taught me that, and I promised myself I'd make a better life, not just for me, but for them too." Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Sometimes I wonder what I'd be willing to sacrifice for the people I care about, for a chance to make a real difference. Being here tonight, it's like I've stepped into a different world, a world where anything might be possible." She looked up at Victor, a mix of vulnerability and determination in her eyes. "I know it sounds strange, but receiving that invitation felt like maybe I was meant to be here. Like I have a purpose, even if I don't know what it is yet." Victor listened intently, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and something that looked almost like sorrow. He squeezed her hand gently. "Your capacity for selflessness is remarkable, Elena. But be careful, sometimes the noblest sacrifices come with the highest costs." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine at his words, though she couldn't explain why. "What do you mean?" she asked. Victor's smile was tinged with sadness, just that the most profound changes often require the greatest sacrifices. But let's not dwell on such heavy topics. Tonight is for celebration, after all. As they continued to dance, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Victor's words held a deeper meaning. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite explain, that made her feel as if she was on the brink of a life-changing discovery. The night wore on,
and the heat of the crowded ballroom began to feel oppressive. Elena found herself longing for a breath of fresh air. As if reading her mind, Victor gently guided her towards a set of French doors leading to a balcony. They stood on the balcony, the cool night air a welcome respite from the stuffy ballroom. Elena shivered slightly, and Victor draped his jacket over her shoulders. The gesture felt oddly intimate. "Tell me about yourself, Victor," Elena said. "You seem different from the others here." Victor's gaze turned distant. "I suppose I am. I've seen many midnight masquerades, Elena. Each one feels like a lifetime, yet passes in the blink of an eye." Elena frowned, puzzled by his words. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, smiling softly. "Never mind. Tell me about your dreams, Elena. What do you hope for?" Their conversation deepened, touching on hopes, fears, and philosophies. Elena found herself opening up to Victor in a way she never had with anyone before. As the night wore on, Elena found herself more and more drawn to Victor. They danced, they laughed, they shared stories. But as much as she was enjoying herself, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The other guests never seemed to eat or drink, merely holding glasses and plates for show. The music, while beautiful, had an eerie quality to it, as if it were coming from very far away. And when Elena tried a canapé from a passing waiter's tray, it tasted like ash in her mouth. "I don't know," Elena replied, frustrated. "It's just, everything feels a bit off. The food tastes weird, the music sounds strange, and have you noticed how the other guests move? It's like they're not quite real." "Victor," she said, pulling him aside. "Is it just me, or is something strange going on here?" Victor's face grew serious. "What do you mean?" Victor glanced at the ornate clock on the wall. It read 11:55 p.m. His eyes widened, and he grabbed Elena's hand. "We need to go," he said urgently. "Now." "What? Why?" Elena asked, confused and a little hurt. "Victor, what's going on?" "There's no time to explain," he insisted, trying to pull her towards the exit. "Please, Elena, you have to trust me. We need to leave before midnight." But Elena stood her ground. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on." Victor looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and despair. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "but I'm afraid it's too late now." As if on cue, the grand clock began to chime. Midnight had arrived. The sound of the clock seemed to shatter the illusion that had surrounded them all night. Before Elena's horrified eyes, the opulent ballroom began to decay. Paint peeled from the walls, revealing rotting wood underneath. The crystal chandeliers turned to rusted metal, their lights flickering and dying. But the worst transformation was happening to the guests. Their elegant costumes melted away, revealing rotting flesh and bleached bone. Hollow eye sockets stared out from behind crumbling masks, and the air filled with the sickly sweet smell of decay. Elena screamed, stumbling backwards. She turned to Victor, expecting to see him transformed like the others. But while his costume had faded to a tattered, centuries-old outfit, he remained whole. His mask had disappeared, revealing a face that was handsome but terribly, terribly sad. "I'm so sorry, Elena," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the decaying ballroom. "I tried to get you out in time. I always try, but I always fail." "Victor," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. "What are you?" He smiled wryly. "I'm a ghost, Elena. We all are. Cursed to relive this ball every Halloween, trapped between life and death." Elena's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Ghosts weren't real. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank or hallucination. But as a skeletal hand reached out to grasp her arm, she knew with sickening certainty that this was all too real. "How?" she managed to ask, dodging the grasping hands of the ghostly partygoers. "Why?" Victor guided her through the chaos, keeping the other spirits at bay. It happened 100 years ago, he explained as they moved. This was meant to be the grandest Halloween ball ever held. But the host, Lord Ravencrest, was a cruel man. He'd made a deal with dark forces to gain his wealth and power. They ducked into a side room, and Victor barred the door behind them. The sounds of the ghostly revelry continued outside, a horrific parody of the elegant ball it had been moments before. On the stroke of midnight, Victor continued, Lord Ravencrest revealed his true nature. He had lured the city's elite here not to entertain them, but to sacrifice them to a dark god from a far realm in a ritual to gain immortality. Elena felt sick. Did it work? Victor laughed bitterly. In a way, the ritual went wrong. Instead of granting Ravencrest immortality, it trapped us all in this limbo. Every Halloween, the ball repeats. We're given a few hours of illusion, a taste of the life we once had. Then at midnight, the truth is revealed, and we're forced to relive our deaths.
But you're different, Elena said, studying Victor's face. You're trying to save me.
Why? I was the only one who tried to stop Ravencrest, Victor explained. I failed, but as punishment for my interference, I was cursed with awareness. Every year, I remember everything. I try to save one living soul who wanders in, to break the cycle. But I've never succeeded. Elena's mind raced. There had to be a way out of this. How do we break the curse? She asked. Victor shook his head. I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for a century.
Suddenly, the door burst open. Lord Ravencrest stood there, once resplendent in his costume, now a horrifying specter of rotting flesh and malevolent energy. Trying to steal my prize, son? He snarled. You know the rules. The living soul belongs to me. Elena felt a surge of anger. This monster had killed all these people, trapped them in this horrible existence, and now he thought he could claim her too. No, she said, stepping forward. I don't belong to anyone. Ravencrest laughed, a horrible sound like breaking glass. Brave little thing, aren't you? But bravery won't save you. The curse must be fed. One soul freely given or taken by force. An idea struck Elena. It was crazy, possibly suicidal, but it might just work. Her mind raced, recalling Victor's words about the nature of the curse and the power of sacrifice. If the curse required a soul freely given, perhaps the intention behind the offering mattered more than the recipient. What if I offered my soul willingly? She said slowly. But not to you. Both Ravencrest and Victor stared at her in shock. Elena, no, Victor said, his voice filled with anguish. You don't know what you're doing. The curse is too powerful. But Elena stood her ground, her voice growing stronger with conviction. I think I do. You said the curse needs a soul freely given. Well, I'm offering mine, but not to feed your twisted immortality, Ravencrest. I'm offering it to all of your victims, to break the curse and set them free. Elena's words seemed to resonate with an unseen force. The air around them crackled with energy, as if the very fabric of the curse was responding to her declaration. Ravencrest's eyes widened in fury and fear. You can't do that. The curse doesn't work that way. I think it does, Elena counted, her voice steady. The power of the curse comes from the souls you've trapped. By offering my soul to them instead of you, I'm changing the meaning of the sacrifice. I'm giving them the strength to break free. As Elena spoke, she felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of rightness in her decision. She turned to Victor, her eyes shining with determination and something deeper. Victor, you showed me what true sacrifice means. Now it's my turn to make a difference. Victor reached for her, his face a mixture of admiration and despair. Elena, no. I can't let you sacrifice yourself. Not when I've finally found someone He hesitated, then whispered. Someone I could love. Elena's heart swelled with emotion. Victor, I think I could love you too. That's why I have to do this.
Love isn't just about holding on, sometimes it's about letting go for a greater good. As she spoke these words, Elena felt a pulling sensation, as if her very essence was being drawn out of her. But instead of flowing towards Ravencrest, streams of light began to emerge from her, each one seeking out one of the ghostly guests. The air around them shimmered with otherworldly energy as the curse began to unravel. Ravencrest howled in rage, his form beginning to dissolve as the power he had hoarded for so long slipped away. No, this can't be happening. The curse is mine to control, but his protests were in vain. Elena's selfless act had fundamentally altered the nature of the curse, turning its power back upon itself. As the ghostly guests began to glow with renewed energy, Ravencrest's form grew more insubstantial, the years of his unnatural existence catching up to him all at once. In that moment, as she felt her own life force ebbing away, Elena understood the true power of sacrifice. It wasn't just about giving something up, it was about changing the very nature of the world through an act of pure, selfless love. Ravencrest howled in rage, his form beginning to dissolve. No, this can't be happening. He lunged at Elena, his spectral hands grasping at her throat. Victor leaped between them, his own ghostly form glowing with a fierce, protective light. "It's over, Father," he declared. "Your reign of terror ends now." The decaying mansion began to shake violently. Chandeliers crashed to the floor, and the walls cracked and crumbled. Amidst the chaos, the ghostly guests began to transform. The decay fell away from their forms, revealing the people they once were. One by one, they turned to Elena, their eyes filled with gratitude and peace. An elderly woman approached, her once skeletal hand now whole as she gently touched Elena's cheek. "Thank you, my dear," she whispered before fading into a soft golden light. Elena watched in awe as the spirits ascended, their faces serene as they finally found release. The ballroom filled with a warm, comforting glow, a stark contrast to the darkness that had pervaded it moments before. Ravencrest, now a pitiful shadow of his former self, cowered in a corner. "What have you done?" he wailed. "My power, my immortality." Elena stood tall, facing the fading specter. "You never understood true power. It's not about control or fear. It's about sacrifice and love." As she spoke, the last of Ravencrest's form dissipated, leaving behind nothing but a faint, dark mist that quickly evaporated in the growing light. Elena turned to Victor, suddenly aware of how weak she felt. Her knees buckled, and he caught her in his arms. "Victor," she murmured, "what's happening to me?" His face was a mixture of sorrow and admiration. "You've given a part of yourself to break the curse, Elena. It's changing you." Elena looked down at her hands, seeing them become translucent. She felt lighter, as if she were floating. Am I dying?" Victor shook his head. "Not dying, transforming. You've become something between living and ghost." He cupped her face gently. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this for you." Elena smiled weakly. "Don't be sorry. I made my choice." She looked around at the fading remnants of the mansion. "What happens now?" "Now," Victor said, his own form beginning to glow. "We all move on. But you have a choice, Elena. You can go back to your life, changed but still part of the living world. Or? Elena prompted, her heart racing. Victor's eyes shone with hope and love. "Or you can come with me, into whatever lies beyond. I've waited a century for someone like you, Elena. Someone brave enough to break the curse. Someone I could love." Elena felt a warmth spread through her, despite her fading form. She thought of her life in the world above, the social climbing, the shallow parties. Then she looked at Victor, at the depth of feeling in his eyes. "I choose you," she said softly. "Whatever lies beyond, I want to face it with you." Victor's smile was radiant as he took her hand. Around them, the last of the mansion faded away, leaving them standing in an empty field under the light of dawn.
"Are you ready?" Victor asked.
Elena nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and peace. "I'm ready." Hand in hand, they began to fade, their forms becoming one with the morning light. As the sun crested the horizon, its rays fell upon a single, perfect rose blooming where Elena and Victor had stood. 2 years after Elena's disappearance, her parents, Robert and Maria Wilson, sat in their modest apartment with a lawyer from the Crest Foundation. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," the lawyer began gently, "Elena was named a beneficiary in Victor Crest's will. Given her presumed death, the inheritance will transfer to you." Robert frowned. "Inheritance?" "Elena never mentioned knowing any Victor Crest. Your daughter made quite an impression," the lawyer smiled. "The details are confidential, but her actions had a profound impact." She slid an envelope across the table. "This inheritance will ensure you never worry about finances again." Maria's hand trembled as she reached for it. "Our Elena. She always said she'd take care of us." The lawyer then presented a single golden rose. "This was found on the estate. We thought you should have it." As Robert and Maria examined the rose, a sweet scent filled the room. For a moment, they could have sworn they heard Elena's laughter on a phantom breeze. "Your daughter's legacy will live on through the Foundation's charitable works," the lawyer said as she left. In the silence that followed, Robert and Maria felt an inexplicable warmth, as if Elena was still watching over them. And in a realm beyond mortal understanding, Elena and Victor danced on, their love eternal.